Hello and welcome. Today I'll be talking about the Villisca axe murders that occurred on June 10th, 1912. The day that I'm actually recording this audio is June 10th, 2021, so it has been 109 years to the date that these murders have occurred and they remain unsolved to this day. The story takes place in a small town called Villisca in Montgomery County, Iowa. The story involves the Moore family and the Stillinger family. In the early 1900s, Montgomery County was flourishing. Business had lined the streets and trains were frequent. Also, the first armory of Iowa was opened here. The company housed there participated in the 1916 Mexican expedition, World War I, and World War II, as well as the Korean and Vietnam Wars. During World War II, Montgomery County lost more men per capita than any other county in the United States. Villisca surely contributed several of her own to that number. Villisca is named after the Indian term Woliska, which means evil spirits. Villisca had a population of around 2,000 in 1910 to 1920. Now the amount of people that lived there has been cut in half. The adults that were killed that day were Josiah Moore, or as he liked to go by, Joe Moore, and his wife Sarah Moore. Joe B. Moore was one of Villisca's most prominent businessmen. Joe married Sarah Montgomery on December 6th of 1899 at the home of her parents. Joe and Sarah Moore had four children: Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. Joe had been a resident of Villisca for 13 years and was employed by Frank Jones at the Jones store for 9 years. After that, he opened his own business and took the John Deere contract that Jones had. Sarah Montgomery, that was her surname beforehand, changed her name to Moore after she got married, was born in Knox County, Illinois in 1873 and moved to Iowa with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. John Montgomery, and her sister Mary. They made this move in 1894 approximately. She was 39 years old and the mother of four children when she was murdered in her bed. Sarah was an active member of the Presbyterian Church and led the Children's Day exercises on June 9th. On Sunday evening, June 9th, 1912, Joe Moore and his wife Sarah took their four children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, to the Children's Day service at the Presbyterian Church. Accompanying them were Lena and Ina Stillinger, neighbors who had asked their parents permission to stay overnight with the Moore children. The Children's Day service was an end of the year Sunday school program. Sarah Moore was a co-director, and her children performed their little speeches and recitations along with the other Sunday school members. The service ended with a social mingling that lasted until at least 9:30 p.m. When everyone had left, the weather outside was cloudy, damp, and had a cool air. No one suspected that neither the Moores nor their overnight guests would be seen alive again. They walked the 3 blocks to their homes, had cookies and milk before going to bed, and they went to sleep. The day before the horrific killings, the Moore family and their two overnight guests went to the church that was located 3 blocks away. It was Sunday evening, June 9th, 1912. It was the Children's Day service, which was an end of the year Sunday school program. Sarah Moore was a co director, and her children performed their little speeches and recitations along with other Sunday school members. The service ended at some time, and then after that, there was a social mingling between parents and children, and that lasted until about 9:30 p.m. After that, everyone left. The weather at the time was cool, damp, and had a nice breeze. No one ever thought that the Moore family and its two overnight guests would be not seen alive again. The next morning at 7:30 a.m., Mary Peckham, the elderly neighbor to the Moore family, noticed that the house, which would be bustling with noise in the mornings, was eerily quiet. This caused her to be alarmed. She phoned up Joe Moore's brother, Ross Moore, and he arrived at Joe's home at 8 a.m. He inspected the first floor and he went into one of the bedrooms and he noticed that there were two bodies in the room. Noticed that there's blood on the bedside, and with obviously shock and horror at what he was looking at, he quickly left the house, called Joe's store, and told the worker Ed Shelley at the time to call Henry or Hank, the sheriff. The sheriff arrived around 8:30 a.m. He went inside the home and he came back And in his words, he said, "There's a body in every bedroom." So, as of right now, there are two theories as to how this murder went down. The first theory is that when the Moore family and their two guests were gone to church, someone broke in and him, her, or they went and hid inside the attic. They hid in the attic, they waited till they went to sleep, and then early in the morning on June 10th, they made their crime. They did their crime. They went down and used the axe, brought it down 20 times, 20 to 30 times on average per person, and did it with so much force that them left marks on the upper side of the wall. Uh, so they raise up the axe, and as they raise up the axe, the top part of the axe or the backs of the axe started making marks on top of the ceiling. And this just shows the amount of force that was used. Quite gruesome. Really gruesome. Now, the second theory is that early morning on June 10th, someone broke in. Someone broke in and they did the crime. Like I said, 20 times, 20, 30 times. But these are the two theories that are going around right now. There are a few things that are bizarre about the murder scene. First of all, the axe was found by the room that the Stillinger girls were staying in. It was on the south wall of the house, and right next to it was a 4-pound slab of bacon. To this day, we don't know why the killer put that there, or if the killer put that there. But right now, it's suspected that it was the killer that put that there. Another weird thing was that the mirrors in the house were all covered with pieces of clothing that was taken from the dressers and the closets of the Moore family. We don't know as to why the killer did that, or as to if he actually did that. And to this day, it's suspected that it was the killer or killers that did that. The murder scene was not the only bizarre thing about this case. It was also the list of suspects. There are plenty of suspects if you look at this case up online, but we'll be going over the top three suspects that the investigators looked into. Now we'll be looking at the first suspect. His name was Frank Jones. He was the store owner that Joe Moore used to work for before he opened up his own store. When he opened up his own store, he took a lucrative John Deere franchise with him. So that made Frank Jones very, very upset. At the same time, Frank Jones' daughter-in-law was supposedly having an affair with Joe Moore, which also fanned the flames of hatred that he had for him. He was a prominent businessman and also a senator in Iowa. So many people believe this was from the Wilkerson investigation. He believed that Frank Jones paid a hitman to actually kill the Moore family and leave no one alive. But Frank Jones and his family deny the claims, and to this day, they have never been charged or even went on trial for this heinous crime. The second suspect is William Mansfield, also known as Blackie. The question was he paid by Frank Jones to commit the Moore murders? William Mansfield of Blue Island, Illinois, was a prime suspect of the Burns Detective Agency of Kansas City and Detective James Newton Wilkerson. According to Wilkerson investigation, the murder of Joe Moore and the other occupants of the Moore home were committed by Mansfield, who was in turn hired by F.F. Jones. Mansfield was also known as George, Worley, and other aliases. According to Wilkerson, Mansfield was a cocaine fiend and a serial killer. Wilkerson also believed Mansfield was responsible for the axe murders of his wife, infant child, father-in-law, and mother-in-law in Blue Island, Illinois, on July 5, 1914, 2 years after the Villisca murders. The axe murders committed in Paula, Kansas, 4 days before the Villisca murders, and the murders of Jenny Peterson and Jenny Miller in Aurora, Colorado. All cases that were similar to the Villisca axe murders, which involved an axe, and also the covering of mirrors with the use of cloths from the victims. The third suspect is Reverend George Kelly. He was the only suspect that was tried for this case, and he was found not guilty. He arrived in Villisca on Sunday morning, and he left Monday morning. so he was there only for one day. Now, at 5:19 a.m., the morning following the murders, the Reverend Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly left Villisca on board the westbound number 5 train. Allegedly told fellow travelers that there were 8 dead souls back in Villisca, Iowa, butchered in their beds while they slept, he said, even though the bodies had not yet been discovered. Kelly had arrived in Villisca for the first time in Sunday morning of their murders and attended a Sunday school performance by the Stillinger girls before departing early Monday. He returned 2 weeks later and, posing as a detective, joined a tour of the murder house with a group of detectives. Authorities picked up Reverend George Kelly a few weeks after the murders because of recipients that had alerted them because of his rambling letters. Kelly, he was the son and grandson of English ministers, had suffered a mental breakdown as an adolescent. Since immigrating to America with his wife in 1904, Kelly had preached Methodist churches across North Dakota, Minnesota, Kansas, and Iowa. He had been assigned as a visiting minister to several small communities north of Villisca, where he developed a reputation for odd behavior. He had also been convicted of sending obscene material through the mail and had spent time in a mental hospital. A grand jury indicted Kelly for Lena Stinglinger's murder, and he was interrogated throughout the summer of 1917 while in jail awaiting trial. On August 31st at 7 a.m., Kelly signed a confession to the murder, saying God had whispered to him to, in quotes, suffer the children to come unto me, end quote. Kelly recanted his confession at trial, and his case went to the jury on September 26th. The jury deadlocked 11 to 1 for acquittal. A second jury was immediately organized, but acquitted Reverend Kelly in November. No one else has ever been tried for the murders, and the crime remains one of the most horrific unsolved mass murders in American history.